Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. President Djang has arrived in Chile for the second leg of his South America trip, where he will meet with Chilean President Jose Antonio Kast to modernize the free trade agreement and expand cooperation on critical minerals and energy. US President Trump has vowed to strike Iran very hard after Tehran fired ballistic missiles at US forces in Jordan, all of which were intercepted, as a suspected drone strike also hit a US-owned tanker at Egypt's Damietta port. The US Federal Reserve has held interest rates steady for a fifth consecutive meeting, with Chair Kevin Walsh citing the economy's resilience and the need for more clarity on inflation, despite renewed pressure from Trump to cut rates. President Djang, who's on an overseas trip to the Americas, has landed in Santiago. He will sit down with his Chilean counterpart, Jose Antonio Kast, for talks on strengthening cooperation on a free trade agreement. Our Blue House correspondent Yun reports from on the ground.
Having wrapped up his state visit to Brazil, President Djang has landed in Chile, the second leg of his three-nation trip to South America. Meeting the Korean community on Wednesday, President Lee highlighted Korea's ties with Chile.
양국 국민이 더 깊은 신뢰와 우정의 마음을 나누는 한-칠레 관계의 새로운 미래를 목격하고 있습니다. 핵심 강물, 청정에너지, 디지털과 인공지능, 과학기술과 문화에 이르기까지 양국 간의 협력의 지평은 점차 더 넓어지고 있습니다.
The next day, he will lay a wreath at the monument for Bernardo O'Higgins, honored as one of the nation's founding fathers. President Lee will go to the presidential palace on Thursday to meet with his Chilean counterpart, Jose Antonio Kast, who took office in March. The leaders will attend an official welcoming ceremony, expanded talks, an exchange of MOUs, a joint press conference, and lunch. Their key focus is modernizing the Korea-Chile Free Trade Agreement, which hasn't been updated since it went into effect in 2004 to reflect new areas, including digital trade and environmental cooperation.
We expect to dramatically increase trade with the South American countries and support our companies making inroads into the regional market.
South Korea also looks to expand cooperation in critical minerals, energy, and food. Chile is one of the major producers of copper and lithium.
We plan to strengthen our strategic partnership related to critical mineral supply chains and deepen discussions on diversifying sources of food and energy imports.
Also on the agenda is cooperation for the UN Ocean Conference set to be co-hosted in 2028 by South Korea and Chile. After concluding the summit, Lee will attend a Korea-Chile business roundtable. The South Korean president's trip to the key economic power in South America takes place as the country looks to expand its diplomatic horizons to the global south. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Santiago.
Following his stay in Chile, President Lee departs for Argentina for the final leg of his South America tour, a broader effort to expand trade and investment with three of the bloc's key economies, for a summit with his Argentinian counterpart, President Javier Milei. The two leaders are expected to discuss ways to deepen economic ties, energy cooperation, and broader regional partnerships. So for more on what to look out for, we're joined by Tae Hyun-jin, a professor of political science at Kyunghee University. Professor Chae, thanks for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, Professor, President Lee is, due to arrive in Argentina for talks with President Javier Milei. So, what are the key issues to watch out for in that summit, and what would constitute a successful outcome for South Korea?
I think there are three key issues to watch. The first one is energy. Argentina has one of the world's largest share of shale gas resources. So, South Korea wants to work more with Argentina to build a stable energy partnership. So today, energy security is more important than ever, partly because of the war in the Middle East. So Strait of Hormuz is blocked now, and the freedom of navigation is challenged. And therefore, energy cooperation with Argentina is very important. And secondly, trade and investment. Argentina is an important member of Mercosur, and this is the largest trading bloc in South America, including Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. So the two leaders will talk more about how to increase the trade and investment opportunity between the two countries. And they may also discuss the potential Korea-Mercosur trade agreement. And thirdly, supply chain. South Korea wants safer and stronger supply chains for energy, food, and key minerals. And Argentina can be an important partner in all of this area. Therefore, for South Korea, success is not only about signing new agreement with Argentina. The bigger goal is to build a stronger partnership and create more chances to work together in the future. And therefore, I think this meeting is about the future. And if the two leaders can build the trust and agree to work more closely together, I think the summit will be a success.
Right, and this will be the first official bilateral visit to Argentina by a South Korean president in 22 years. So why is this visit particularly significant now, and what message does it send about Seoul's diplomatic priorities in Latin America?
I think this visit is important for two reasons. As you just mentioned, this visit has a historical meaning. The last official visit by a South Korean president was in 2004, when President Roh Moo-hyun met Argentine President Kirchner. And at that time, the two countries talked mainly about energy, natural resources, and the situation on the Korean Peninsula. And today, the focus is much broader. The world has changed, and Latin America has become much more important because of energy, critical mineral, food security, and also global supply chain. And secondly, this visit showed that South Korea wants to work more closely and build a stronger tie with the global South. As the global economy becomes more uncertain because of the war in the Middle East and of the war in Ukraine, South Korea wants to work with more countries instead of relying on only a few partners, such as the United States and China. And I think Argentina, in this sense, is a very good example. It has large shale gas reserve and strong farming industry, and also important role in Mercosur. And these strengths make Argentina an ideal partner for South Korea. So I think the message is clear. The South Korea is expanding our diplomacy beyond our traditional partner. And South Korea wants to build a stronger economic tie and improve energy security and create new business opportunities with the countries in Latin America.
Right, and as you said before in your first answer, Argentina is rich in shale gas and together with Brazil plays a leading role in Mercosur. So how could President Lee's visit help to expand Korea's energy security trade opportunities and, broader economic cooperation with the region?
I think this visit is important in that sense because Korea and Argentina have different strengths, and these strengths fit very well together. For example, Argentina has energy, food, and natural resources. And South Korea has advanced technology, manufacturing industry, and also investment capacity. And so the two countries can help each other. For example, our Korean companies can invest in Argentina's energy project. And at the same time, Argentina can provide a stable supply of energy and other resources that South Korea needs. And the same idea also applies to trade. The South Korea can export cars, battery, ships, and digital technology to Argentina. And also Argentina can export energy and agricultural products and raw material to South Korea. So in that sense, both sides can benefit each other. And this is important for the whole region as well. As I said earlier, Argentina is an important member of the Mercosur, and therefore, stronger economic ties with Argentina can also create more opportunities in other South American countries. So I think this visit is less about one business deal, and this is more about building a long-term economic partnership. So if the two leaders can encourage more business investment and more private sector cooperation, the benefit will continue long after the summit meeting is over.
Right, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. But Professor, thank you very much for coming on this morning and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you very much.
Samsung Electronics on Thursday said its second quarter operating profit rose more than 1,800% from a year earlier to 89.5 trillion won, or approximately $62.1 billion. Sales increased 130% to 171.5 trillion won. Its chip division posted 127.5 trillion won in sales and 89.2 trillion won in operating profit. Record DRAM and NAND sales drove another record quarterly performance following the first quarter. Samsung said it expects earnings growth to continue in the second half as semiconductor demand remains strong. Korea's financial authorities are considering new measures to rein in extreme stock market volatility. Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chol met with the heads of financial regulators on Wednesday to discuss possible safeguards. One proposal would limit single-stock leveraged ETFs to 20% of an individual investor's portfolio, though no final threshold has been decided. Regulators are also weighing higher financial requirements for brokerage firms to discourage excessive trading, along with a simulated trading requirement in addition to the current mandatory investor education program. The decisions come after the benchmark stock index tumbled nearly 6% on Wednesday, following an almost 11% plunge the previous trading day. Meanwhile, in the U.S. Federal Reserve keeps interest rates unchanged for a fifth straight meeting, citing persistent inflation and uncertainty despite recent economic shocks. The decision comes as President Donald Trump renews pressure for lower borrowing costs, while Fed Chair Kevin Warsh says policymakers remain focused on restoring price stability. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has left interest rates unchanged for a fifth straight meeting, choosing to wait for more clarity on inflation and the broader economic outlook despite renewed pressure from President Donald Trump to cut borrowing costs. At the end of its two-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting, the Fed voted 9-3 to keep its benchmark interest rate at a range of 3.5 to 3.75%. The decision leaves the interest rate gap between South Korea and the United States at as much as 1 percentage point.
Today, as you know, our committee decided to vote by a 9-3 vote to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 3.5 to 3.75%.
Speaking after the meeting, Fed Chair Kevin Warsh said the central bank remains firmly committed to its 2% inflation target, while describing the U.S. economy as showing impressive resilience despite recent shocks, including renewed fighting in the Iran war. Warsh acknowledged that inflation remains above the Fed's target and said policymakers will continue to monitor incoming data carefully.
Broadly, if you said to me standing in front of you, I abide fully by the strategy document, we're going to deliver 2% inflation and not a whisper more. But to achieve that, I'm looking at a broader set of inflation data than PCE.
Asked whether another rate hike would be the best response if inflation stays elevated, he said higher rates could be part of the solution, but stressed that any decision would be based on a broad assessment of economic conditions rather than inflation alone. The decision comes days after President Trump once again urged the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates, arguing that the United States should have the lowest interest rate in the world to support economic growth. When asked about the Fed's decision on Wednesday, Trump praised Warsh as fantastic, brilliant, and smart, while reiterating that he would still like to see lower interest rates in the months ahead. 이승재, Arirang News.
On tensions in the Middle East, U.S. President Donald Trump is warning of a powerful military response after Tehran launched another missile attack on American forces in Jordan. The renewed fighting broke a brief suspension in attacks, while a suspected drone strike on a U.S.-owned gas tanker in Egypt is raising fears of conflict across the region. Our Jang reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump has vowed to strike Iran very hard after Tehran launched ballistic missiles at American forces stationed in Jordan. Speaking at the White House on Wednesday local time, Trump said while all incoming missiles were intercepted, the attack would be straightened out.
In the meantime, we're going to be hitting them very hard because it's our turn to hit them. They know it's coming.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said it had fired several ballistic missiles at a U.S. airbase and a military center in Jordan. The U.S. military described it as an attempted surprise attack, saying all incoming missiles were intercepted. Jordan's military also said it intercepted 5 missiles launched from Iran. Following a brief lull, the resumption of attacks from both sides has derailed diplomatic momentum, casting serious doubt on efforts to revive the ceasefire. Meanwhile, a suspected drone strike hit a U.S.-owned gas storage tanker at Egypt's Mediterranean port of Damietta. Maritime security firms said the attack struck the Energos Winter, sparking a fire that spread to another vessel. Egypt's petroleum ministry confirmed fires aboard 2 ships but did not identify the cause. It said the flames were brought under control and that no injuries or fatalities were reported. Responsibility for the suspected strike remains unclear. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Korea is expecting to face another day of extreme heat today. Daytime temperatures are forecast to reach between 32 and 38 degrees Celsius, with the highest feels-like temperatures expected to exceed 38 in parts of Gyeongsangnam-do province. Across most of the country, feels-like temperatures will rise above 33 degrees and above 35 degrees in many southern areas. Authorities are urging people to avoid outdoor activities and take precautions against heat-related illnesses. Tropical nights when temperatures remain above 25 degrees Celsius are also expected to continue nationwide. Rescue operations are continuing in Japan after a powerful earthquake struck Kumamoto Prefecture on Tuesday. Experts say the latest quake is believed to have originated along the same fault zone that caused the deadly quakes a decade ago. Park Gono reports.
At least 13 people have been confirmed dead after a powerful earthquake struck Japan's southern Kumamoto prefecture on Tuesday. The earthquake caused widespread destruction and prompted a major rescue operation, leaving people injured and triggering fires, power outages, and significant damage to roads, bridges, and buildings.
I offer my deepest condolences to those who have lost their lives and to their bereaved families. Even now, there are people waiting to be rescued, and this is a race against time. We will marshal all available resources on the ground to save and rescue as many people as possible.
Takaichi urged residents to protect themselves and evacuate to safe locations as strong aftershocks continue. Around 300,000 people have been told to evacuate, while hundreds of self-defense force personnel have been deployed. One of the hardest hit sites was the prefecture's largest shopping mall, the Aeon Mall, where there was an explosion after the quake, although the government said the exact cause of the blast and the building's partial collapse remains under investigation. Footage from the scene showed that part of the mall had collapsed, exposing steel beams and scattering debris across the parking lot as firefighters and rescue crews searched for survivors. The earthquake also caused widespread power outages and ruptured roads across Kumamoto, a region devastated by a series of major earthquakes a decade ago. The 2016 disaster began with a magnitude 6.5 quake, followed 2 days later by a magnitude 7.3 earthquake, leaving around 270 people dead. According to Japan's Asahi and Yomiuri newspapers, experts believe Wednesday's earthquake was triggered by activity along the Hinago fault zone, which was also blamed for the initial quake 10 years ago. Experts also warned that a stronger quake could follow, just as it did a decade ago. As of 4 p.m. Wednesday, the South Korean Consulate General in Fukuoka said no casualties involving Korean nationals have been reported. The Foreign Ministry said it's closely monitoring the situation and will take all necessary steps to ensure the safety of Korean nationals in Japan. 박건우, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Wildfires in Greece have killed 3 firefighters. 2 firefighters died after becoming trapped in a blaze on Crete. A third died fighting a separate fire in the Peloponnese region. High winds forced residents and tourists to evacuate nearby villages. In Spain and France, major wildfires have stabilized, letting evacuees return home, though both countries are bracing for a new heat wave this week. FIFA President Gianni Infantino is giving member federations a deadline to accept a plan to sell a stake in the World Cup to private investors. Infantino on Wednesday set a September 19th deadline for federations to accept $20 million each as part of a plan to create a $20 billion FIFA subsidiary, partly owned by private investors. The plan, where the subsidiary would run the World Cup and Club World Cup, is backed by Joshua Kushner, brother of Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. European soccer body UEFA is holding an emergency meeting with its members and says opposition to the plan is, quote, significant and growing. Kenya's Wildlife Service says 15 elephants have died in the Amboseli area near the Tanzanian border over the past month. 10 of the animals showed similar symptoms, including partial paralysis, and died within a day or two. Kenya's Wildlife Service says there's no evidence of any risk to humans. Preliminary tests detected a potential toxic substance, though officials say more analysis is needed. Irish singer-songwriter Glen Hansard, who won an Academy Award for the 2000 film Once, has died in a motorcycle crash. Police say the crash happened on the outskirts of Dublin before dawn on Wednesday, and that he was pronounced dead a short time later. Glen won his Oscar for Falling Slowly, a song he co-wrote with Once co-star Markéta Irglova. Tributes poured in from musicians calling Glen, quote, a great musician, a good friend, and a generous and gracious man.
The heat is becoming more intense by the day. Under strong high pressure, skies will stay mostly sunny across the country, allowing temperatures to soar once again. In fact, Yangsan saw 40 degrees Celsius for the first time ever in July yesterday. So the Gyeongsangdo provinces are having the toughest summer, with temperatures hovering around 40 degrees Celsius. And even today, Yangsan and Busan will both climb to 39 degrees Celsius this afternoon. So if you're spending time outdoors, remember 3 simple heat safety tips. Drink plenty of water, stay in the shade whenever possible, and take frequent breaks. These small steps will help you to stay away from the heat-related illnesses. And this afternoon, Seoul and Gwangju will be getting up to 34 degrees Celsius, Daegu at 37 degrees, Gyeongju at 38 degrees Celsius. Extreme heat and sunny weather will continue for the next several days. And as we move into August, the heat is expected to become even more intense.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.